What's up, Cybernetics, and welcome back to the second part of our Gmail clone tutorial with Ionic. In the first part, we've built the basic structure for that email list, all the setup that we needed. We got this cool header animation, we got the top bar, the colors, everything. But today, we're gonna take this a step further. I really just had to do it. And we will do two cool things today. First, we're gonna implement a FAB button that changes the width and what is displayed in the FAB button while we scroll down and up. And the second part is really epic. We implement this slide to delete animation. Yes, there's an Ionic sliding component, but what we implement today is like 100 times better. We get standout functionality with a custom class, we got different background colors, we got haptic feedback, we got animations, really, we got everything. If you don't implement this, really, I don't know what you're building. So I really hope you enjoy this. You can find the code linked below the video. Of course, if you're interested in learning more of these Ionic techniques and more about building apps with Ionic, go check out my ionicacademy.com, my place to help you with everything Ionic. So let's dive into the second part of our Gmail clone right now. Alright, let's dive into the second part, or could also be a standalone part, as you can basically grab the part from the first tutorial below from the GitHub repository and then get started with the first thing. We're gonna start with the FAB animation because that's actually a bit shorter and easier. So go ahead and generate a new directive in your project. And once you got that directive, you're gonna have to add it to the shared directives module. So here we go. Animated FAB directive to the declarations and exports. What do we need? Well, perhaps we get started on the mail page. So the selector is app animated FAB, and we're gonna add that selector to our mail page. Just a quick review or looking back at the initial application, that's how it looks right now. We already got a few animations here, especially the header, but now we want to show this FAB, which basically collapses when you scroll down and comes back and expands when you scroll back up. So we're gonna put a FAB into our mail page. Just put it to the bottom. Ion FAB. Do I have? That's not the best snippet. Is this one better? No. Is this one? That's good. Okay, we want to put it to the bottom, horizontal, and slot fixed. That's fine. We want to give the button itself the color light, and we're going to give the icon the color primary, which will be this red color. Also, we will use the pencil outline, not the perfect icon, but it's okay in this case. And there's also a little text. We're gonna put it into a span. It would work without this span, but I think we need to target this one specifically. And then we're just gonna add a template reference to the FAB button so we can animate that button and easily access it when we want to put it to our directive, which we will put onto Ion content. Why do we put it here? Simply because Ion content emits the scroll events, and we basically want to listen to all those scroll events inside our app animated FAB, just like we did within the app height header. Okay, that's everything for the mail page setup. I'm gonna quickly define the input here. Add input. App animated FAB, so then we will not see any other complaints from the mail page, hopefully. App no property, shared directives. Actually, I think we're fine. Let's see. We can close this and open it up again. Yeah, now it's fine. So we did everything right. The FAB button right now looks horrible. And that's simply because the styling from the FAB button is usually meant just to display an icon. So we're gonna have to put in a bit of custom CSS within the mail page Ion FAB button, and we will specifically change the width. And also I want to set a custom height because I felt like the default height was a bit too big. That's just a few pixels less, but it's better. On top of that, we should change the border radius, but I can also show you this right here in action. Let's make this a bit bigger. There we go. So right on the ion FAB, what we want to change is the border radius. We can set this to 20. That looks a bit better. I also found that the default box shadow looks actually different from the Gmail client, so we're gonna go with this. It's a bit more shadow to find that button easier. So we can definitely put both of them within the Ion FAB button already. Then we can style the Ion icon to change the font size a bit. I would like to make from the Ion icon the font size to something like 20. Yeah, a bit smaller. That's fine, I think. So let's put this in here as well. Ion icon, font size 20. And then I also wanted to change the color of our text in here. And it looks like this text is actually within the native button, but there's a cool way to style this, and that is through shadow parts. So we can use on the Ion FAB button a part that's called native. Can I quickly find this within the documentation so I can show you where I got this from? Let's take a quick look. Components, then we search for FAB, Ion FAB button, and then somewhere at the bottom we should find the CSS shadow parts. There we can access the close icon and the native HTML button or anchor element, and that's exactly the one we wanted to get. So by getting this native part, we can now set the color to something like, I think we want to use the red, so Ion color primary. I also wanted to change the font size and font weight. Let me quickly bring this in. And once we save this, we should see that Compose now has a red color and a bit bigger font weight. So sometimes, not for every component and input, you can find these shadow parts defined on the Ionic page. Usually there is a bit of margin between these icons. That led to a problem with the animation we will talk about later. For now, is this actually pencil outline? It doesn't really look like a pencil outline. Is there any difference if I use pencil outline or not? I don't feel so. Interesting. We're gonna keep it like this for now. So now we got our FAB button in place. We don't need the mail page. We got our CSS, and I think we can focus on the animation. So we're gonna put in the same host listener that we used in other directives as well. This host listener will listen to all the Ion scroll events since we attached our directive directly to the Ion content. And in the first part, I actually had a lot of problems figuring out in which direction we actually scroll. I don't know if I found a lot easier way, or if I was just blind in the first part. I really don't know. But basically this would mean we're scrolling down. And now I'm not using an else, but I'm using an else if. So we don't really react to anything with 0. That's actually the whole magic in here. And this one should be console log up. So let's try if this actually works. We are scrolling down, down, down. Even if I stop and then continue, it's still down. And once I scroll up, it's up all the time without down. I can easily change this. So that makes life a lot easier. We got already the right places to call our animation, but we should also keep track of the current state, since we don't want to run the animation all the time. We just run it once when we start scrolling down, or once when we scroll it up. So let's set something like expanded to true, because in the beginning the button is basically expanded. And if we are scrolling down, we will set this dot expanded to false, and then we call a function to shrink the FAB. This dot shrink FAB. Also, in the other case, we're gonna set this dot expanded to true, and in that case, we're gonna call something like expand FAB. Let's call this expand FAB. Which will basically do the opposite. Okay, on top of that, Maybe, yeah. Right now we're not really using this dot expanded. So let's put this in here. We only wanna do all of the fun if we are currently expanded. That means we're scrolling down and the button is big. So we're gonna set it to false and call the shrink function, which will trigger the animation. While we then continue to scroll down, expanded will be false, so we'll never get back into this block. Also, same for this one. Of course, this time we're using not this expanded to get into this. Okay, how do we actually perform this? Well, we're gonna create a custom animation. So let's create a function, setup animation, as we will basically define the Ionic animation upfront and then simply play it when it's about time to play. So private animation controller, animation controller, no code completion today. There we go. And we'll also put a local variable here. Let's just call this shrink animation. Be careful, if you just use animation, you will not get any interface. You should go down to the appropriate type from the Ionic Angular package. Otherwise, you will get strange errors. Now let's call setup animation right in the beginning. And what we're gonna do is we need to basically, first of all, shrink the element. So let's create a shrink function by using the animation controller, create, let's just give it a name, shrink. That should be fine. And then we're gonna add the element on which we wanna run this animation. That is, I think, our FAB button, but I also think the FAB is not yet correct. Let's check this out. So I want to see, yeah, it's passed like this, like ion FAB to our component, and we actually want to get the element. That's basically like the native element. So let's just do this in here. This dot fab equals this dot fab dot element. Just a quick fix to make our life easier. And then we can just add the shrink element here. We're gonna put in a duration of whatever. These values are really just, it kind of works. It's not the perfect animation. I think it is definitely possible. I just couldn't make it any better. I would really waste another day on this to make it perfect, but if you want to, you can definitely make it better. I will just animate from 140 to 50. That is the shrink animation. No, we're gonna leave it like this. Actually, I will just use it as my animation right now. But since we're gonna put in different animations that will run at the same time, we can construct these single animations like this block and then chain all of them together using the animation controller. So in the end, we will put our shrink animation equals this dot animation controller create. That will be the shrink animation. I don't know what happens if you use the same name. Let's give this a little duration as well. You can also put in something like easing. I think, what are we doing? Well, we could ease out, perhaps. Ease out or ease in. I'm always not sure which looks good. Just give it a try. And then call add animation with an array of previous animations. So we're gonna put in the shrink animation. Okay, let's give this a try, and if we scroll down, we want to call this dot shrink animation play. Perhaps this already works. That would be cool. So let's see. We're scrolling down and it actually gets smaller. That was a good start. It looks horrible, but that's always a good start. It runs again, kinda, yeah. Okay, let's try to also do it the opposite way when we scroll back. Initially, I wanted to create everything that we do in here in the opposite kind of way, but you can actually also just add direction reverse to play an animation in the reverse way. And now we should be able to scroll down to make it small and scroll back up to make it bigger. But now if we scroll down, we see that it kind of doesn't work for some reason. And that's usually the problem because Ionic adds specific inline properties after those animations. And you can get rid of them by putting something like this in here after clear styles. So basically, after the animation is finished, we want to remove the inline attribute for width once again. And when we do this, it still doesn't work completely. I actually don't know if we need it. I will comment it out for a second, as there was also something else that I used, and I was using direction alternate in here. I really don't know how this works in the beginning when we called it the first time, since it completely runs fine the first time. But now if I go back, it becomes bigger, and then we go back. So now it works exactly as advertised. That means we basically don't really need this. Maybe we could have another video on these directions and specific properties. Really, if you check out the the animation controller API somewhere after add class, after read, after add write, there's a lot you can do with the animation controller that we haven't taken a look at. Let me know if you want to know more about all these different things. But for today, we're gonna go ahead, and what we're gonna do is, while we shrink the item, we also want to fade out the text. Since you can see the text is really, we don't want to have the text right now. So we should get rid of this, and then it would actually be perfect. So I came up with another fade animation on our text span element. So that's the reason why we used the text span in the first place. So I can now use this .fab insert jQuery query selector span. Really, kind of a bit dirty, but well, I think it's fine. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna animate the opacity to 0 so it fades out, and at the same time we also change the width from the current width 70 about to 0. And once we're done with all of this, we will also set display to none to completely remove it, as it's otherwise still in there. Maybe we don't even need this with the current setup. Let's comment all of this out and give it a try. Usually these videos are really like my personal code review. Maybe you should do the same. Okay. No, it looks like we really should set the display to none. No, no, not yet, not yet. We haven't actually added the fade to our chain here. Right now we only call shrink. Now we call both at the same time. So let's take another look. Oh, that looks a lot better. Oh, that looks good. Oh, that looks good. Oh, it works. It works without all of these things. So we're gonna have to do another episode on these kind of things. But for now, we actually, yeah, we can see if we scroll up, there's a little lag in between. I don't know if it's a specific, playing around with a specific duration. That looks actually kind of good. I feel like that was the fix. Maybe what happens if I put a 400, if we use 400 everywhere? Well, that's actually pretty good. That's better than my first tests. I really enjoyed this. Well, that was the first part of this tutorial. It was actually, we're gonna take a few minutes more. But this is our animated FAB. I think it's a cool component. You can use it. A lot of people use FAB buttons. And so you can put in a bit more information and still save that place when your users are scrolling down, and then you can bring it back up with a quite easy directive that we implemented right here. Okay, well, I'm really happy now that I could actually improve that component. That really made my day now. I'm fired up for the next part, which is definitely one of the coolest animation that I've created. I really think so. What we want to do is we want to create this here as kind of sliding item. Yes, there is an Ionic sliding item component. You can have those options to the side, but the Gmail component does a lot more. If you check out the Gmail component, you will notice that when you scroll here, can we show this? I will do this meanwhile. So I'm gonna open my reflector application at the same time. No problem, I can do this. If you open the Gmail application, you will notice that an item stands out once you start sliding on it. It has different colors on both sides to archive or to delete something. And as well, there's a little haptic feedback that's pretty interesting, which we can use with the capacitor package as well. So here is an example. If I now scroll something, you notice that the item suddenly gets a border here with a little shadow. The icon is small, and after a specific breakpoint, it actually has this haptic feedback and becomes bigger. I can now go back and leave it. It goes back to normal, and from the other side, we also see the same. And if I would now go ahead and delete something after this threshold, it would slide out. And that is exactly what we gonna implement now. And I can promise you it will really look great. Okay, to do this, we're gonna create a new module for shared components. I actually also need to run this, I think. Let's do this. And within that component, within that module, we generate another component, which will act like our new item. So we create all of these, and I already ran the install for capacitor haptics. I'm using capacitor 3, so this is within its own package. Great, we're done with that. Let's go to our shared components now. In here we do the same like we do within the directives. So we're gonna have to add our swipe item component to the declarations and as well to the exports. We also want to use Ionic components here, like an Ion item. So we're gonna add or import the Ionic module. And if you want to use the Angular router, you should also add the router module. I will do it. We won't really go into the navigation to a details page. I initially thought that, but it's actually enough for this video, I think. So this definitely belongs to build with Ionic. Okay, now we're gonna do a bit of copy and paste because we already got that styling and that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna head over to my mail page and I will grab the whole Ion item here. And gonna put this into our new component here. We don't really need this iteration. We can use this on our mail page. So I'm gonna put it in here. And we can just go ahead with, what's the name of our component? Should be app swipe item, right? So we can use app swipe item with the iteration to create the same amount of items from our custom item. It's all red because we also need to import the shared components module now within the lazy loaded module. And then this looks good. We can go back here. We see a few issues here, mostly because open details is not implemented. So let's just copy this from our mail page. Where is open details? Right there. And I'm gonna add this to my swipe item. Then we need the router. You fix one problem, you open 3 new problems. It's always the same. Is the mail page now, is our component happy now? No, because we haven't defined that. Let's quickly fix that by defining a little input for an email. So we can actually pass the data to our custom component. That's a bit of going back and forth between the different elements. Sorry about that, but that's just necessary to make everything work. Now we can use the email input and just pass this onto it. And I think that's fine for now. We got the input. The item is happy for now. And let's see if our code looks the same now. Yeah, no, it's not looking the same because we had this previous class email. So I'm gonna copy over the code for email. We have email, we have a search overlay, and we have an email circle. So I'm definitely gonna use the email circle and the email class. I'm just gonna cut this out from our mail page and put it into our new CSS right here. And then I hope the rows look, yeah, we're back in the game. The rows are fine. And now the fun begins. The first thing that we should change is actually changing the HTML structure a bit, because we're gonna put something basically behind the ion item. When we scroll this to the side, we wanna reveal some kind of background. And therefore I'm gonna put a new class in here outside of our item. I will call this one wrapper. And I'm gonna put two icons in here with two columns. One will have a trash icon with a template reference trash, so we can add a little animation later. Second one will be archive, outline, archive. Now, if you save this, it will once again look pretty horrible since we haven't defined the right styling. So what we're gonna do is for our, can we grab this item? For the wrapper component, let's try and set the background to red so we can actually see it. Okay, that looks great. Now we want to have everything in this one line and aligned nicely. So I'm going to use display flex. Then we can use the flex direction row. And when we use the flex direction row, we can now give the column, I can't use the column, we will do this in a second. We will give the columns equal size, so then we got this amazing layout. We also want to align the items center, that's vertical, I think. I always got problems with this. And we should also set the height. We're gonna set the height for both the wrapper and also the ion item to 89 pixels or something like this. I'm gonna already copy this over to our email for the, no, we're gonna put it into ion item. Isn't that the same, Simon? Yeah, I think it's actually the same. So we're gonna put it there. On top of that, we're gonna use for this one the position absolute. So then it will be behind our item. And also using with 100% just to make, yeah, thanks. 100%. So I would remove the position absolute. Yeah, then we see it, of course, makes sense. But we're gonna use it like this. We're gonna put it into the wrapper class. And what I wanted to show you was that for column, we're gonna use now our flex layout. So for column, we're gonna use as well display flex. We're gonna use flex 1, flex basis 100%, and flex direction column. Now, if I remove absolute, we should also see the result of this. Basically, we have now aligned the items to the side. And once I enable our absolute layout again, the item will simply cover our setup that we've defined in the background. We don't need to worry about green and red colors. We will just change this dynamically on the fly. Now, what is this funny problem here? Ion item has the right height. I also had display flex on this, and also I think background white. Yeah, that solves all the problems. You could also use a different height for the ion item, but so far, then basically every item has the same height, and I think that's actually fine. So we can replace all of this, and then we can go into the swipe item component. As we're gonna, well, we need to do so many things. Definitely we're gonna inject a few things. Let's start with that. We need the gesture controller, as we're gonna react to the swipe events of a user. Gesture controller, please use this one. And as well, we need the animation controller to play some nice animations. Animation controller, there we go. Doesn't even fit into one line. Thanks for that. There we go. We can't really use ng on init. We should actually implement after view init, since we need to perform a few things on actual elements of the view, and they are only initialized inside the ng after view init. So only in that case you can really access view childs. I'm gonna bring in some things that we need. We're gonna need a lot of view childs. we're gonna need our ion item, but we don't really want to get the ion item. If you use the type ion item, you can do cool things like clicking on it and using the Ionic defined API for that item. But if you just want the native item, simply add read element ref to get the real element ref that you usually get with an Angular view child. Then we got our wrapper component, the one in the background, and then we got the two icons. Actually, I don't think we need static in here. I had this previously. I've been testing a lot. Okay, trash and archive. Great. Let's try and actually set up right in here our gesture. So gesture, move, gesture. That's going to be the most interesting part. And then we can also see a bit more about how our layout works. We can call create, and we now need to define a few things. First, the element on which this gesture works. That's just our item native element. We're gonna give this gesture name, whatever, move, swipe, doesn't really matter. Yeah, as long as you don't put array symbol behind it. Then we got the threshold. So when should this swipe action be recognized? Directly after 0. If you don't use this, it kind of feels not right. Then we got the functions. We got on start, which can do something. We got on move, in case we do something. And then we got on end. That's basically the setup for our gesture. On start, we will just set the transition or any kind of transition that might have been defined on our item back to empty string. So we can get the style from our item, then use style dot transition equals empty string. On move, we basically want to do one thing. We want to transform the style of our item and move it along the x-axis. And this is already enough to move it along, I hope. Yeah, of course it's not, because I haven't enabled the gesture. Oh, Simon, that was a quick catch. That could have taken me like 10 minutes to figure out. Okay, you see, I can scroll it. It just stops. I can also scroll it in the other direction. I think that's a pretty good start so far. Now we should define a little breakpoint, because after like this distance, we want to animate the icon, and also if the user drops after this distance, we're going to remove the item. If the user drops in this direction somewhere here, we're just going to fade back. And same for this. Here, fade back. Here, run the delete animation. That's the whole setup idea that we got now. So what we need is a breakpoint. I used a value of 70. Go ahead and play around with different values and feel free to use something else. On top of that, we can do we want to do this now? No, we're gonna do it in the end. Never mind. That's always when you forget about things, right? So if the delta of the event, delta x value, is bigger than 0, we're swiping to the right side. Also, else if, and once again, we will just not use the 0. That is basically the whole trick here. If we're scrolling to the right side, we're gonna set the background color to a nice red. So that's what I meant with we don't really need to set the background color anyway. If we scroll in the other direction, we can use green or a variable, doesn't really matter. And as a result, we can now see this cannot read property native element of undefined. That's great. What's going on with my wrapper? I think I haven't added the template reference. Yeah, that makes sense. So now we should see red, and yeah, we see green. It just works. I'm kind of amazed that this really works, but yeah, well, it does. So that's a good start. Now we need to do more things. We gonna put our translate, well, we can actually leave it like it is. The only thing we need to do now is to check if our delta x value is greater than the animation breakpoint. That means we have scrolled past this defined distance, and then we need to run our animation on the icon. So let's create two functions, animate trash. I will just call it zoom in. It's basically just scaling the element. And another one for animate archive. And if we're in this area, we will call animate trash. No, exactly the opposite, animate trash. But also we need to, and yes, we want to zoom in that case. But we also need to be careful, since now on move would be called all the time, and we would animate the trash all the time. So we're gonna keep track of this with a simple variable. I call this big icon. So big icon is false in the beginning, and if we get to this point, if we are the first time past this breakpoint, we're gonna use it within animate trash to just set this big icon. I think we can actually use the zoom in. Let me think about this. Yeah, it will be true in the first time, and then we will be yeah, that should work. So we will only run this if we're past that breakpoint, and if at that point we're not, we don't have a big icon yet. In that case, we're gonna call animate trash. The else case is basically the same. Or the else case, no, it's completely different actually. The else case should run if we're coming back from this distance to the smaller distance. That means our delta should be between 0 and the distance. So should be greater than 0 and below the animation breakpoint, and the icon should be big. Only in that case we once want to run the zoom out on the animate trash. And the same block can now be created for the animate archive. Only in this case we're gonna measure the delta x differently, since it will be a negative value when you scroll to the left side, so you need to check this value. Yeah, I think you can really figure this out. It's just completely the opposite, and it animates the archive. Let's see how we can implement those functions, because that will make it actually interesting. In that case, we can actually use our haptics plugin. We can import the haptics from Capacitor haptics and also the impact style, and this will give a nice feedback. I can't really show you this on the browser. It's really a pity, because it's completely the same haptic that you get on the actual Gmail client. My phone disappeared from Reflector. That's great, so I can show you this. But we should also animate the icon, so it should get a bit bigger. Let's create another function to set up the icon animations. And did we already define this somewhere? No. So we should definitely have a trash animation. Once again, make sure you're using the Ionic interface, and then you also got an archive animation. And within setup icon animations, which you should call at some point, I forgot this in the beginning as well, we can define those animations. I will bring them in, since I guess the video is already, yeah, we are close to 40 minutes. The setup icon animation. Once again, the same kind of setup that we used before for the FAB button. You call the animation controller, you add the element you want to animate. In this case, it's our trash icon, which we added as a view child with a little duration, and we'll just scale it. And the same is now true for our archive animation, same animation. And now, if we are within one of those two functions, we can just simply run our animation. So if we want to zoom in, we're gonna call this dot trash animation direction. Once again, it didn't really work without setting up alternate here. Else, actually, I could do this in, maybe I could do this in one line. Do you want to see this? No, I guess not. No, we're not doing this today. So we will once again use the logic to just reverse the whole animation. And the same now here, but this time we're going to use the archive animation. As a result, we should see something. I will also bring up my device once again. If we're past a breakpoint, the icon gets bigger, and if we go back, it gets smaller. And this now also works over and over again. Really, the animation works. Also here, everything works as advertised. What can we do next? We can do a lot of things next actually, but there's one more thing that really made the Gmail animation pretty cool. And that was when you start dragging an element, it gets these rounded borders. Can we see this in action? I'm sure we can. Let's put this here. Okay, thanks. If you start with something, yeah. We want to add these rounded borders and the shadow towards the bottom. And therefore, we will just create a new class and simply attach that class to the current object. So let's call this class rounded. We give the item a border radius, a bigger index. Is that still necessary? Yeah, it is, to show the box shadow. So that should work. And now we just need to find a way to add this round class to our item. We should maybe do this right when we start here in onMove. So here we're gonna call this dot item native element class list. I always find this really horrible to work with native item as you don't really get the typings. But anyway, you can add the rounded class like this. And just like we add the class in onEnd, we can simply remove the class. As a result, we can now start dragging an item, and we see it gets a nice shadow, and we can just drag it everywhere. Maybe you could also just add the border on one side because this isn't perfect. Yeah, well, I'm sure you can do this. But overall, it's pretty cool already, and the haptics should work as well. At this point, the only thing that's missing is the onEnd block. So the onEnd block is actually pretty easy. We're gonna define a little transition, so it will anyway transition out within 0.2 seconds. And now we just need to check if our delta x is above the breakpoint, or else if the delta x below the breakpoint, or else, that's actually the easiest case. In that case, we will call style.transform to nothing, which will basically make the item go back to its initial position. And that's also the part we can now test out. If we're here, it will simply snap back in place. Same here. Only if we're here, you see it's not snapping back. But if we're in that area, it will simply go back. And it will go back even from here. Only after our breakpoint, it will stick. After we drop an item in this place, we also need to do something else. We could now just fly the item out, or well, do something like this, but it actually wouldn't look that good. In the real client, you see that it slides out, and at the same time, the height of that row collapses. And we want to do the same. And we can do this by creating a little delete animation as well. We're gonna define this before our gesture. So I'm gonna do it like this. Delete animation. It will use our item in 300 milliseconds, change the height from our defined height in the CSS. Be careful if you use a different height, back to 0. And then we can call the delete animation when we are sure that the item should be deleted. So we're just gonna call this delete in both cases today. It doesn't really matter if it's delete or archive. I'm sure you can figure this out. We're gonna play the delete animation in the other case as well. But that's not all, because only playing the delete animation will only change the height of the item. So right now it will work. It will actually change. That looks kind of good. But there are two things. It's not really removed from the list, and also usually the item at the same time slides out. So if we want to delete something, we will at the same time also translate the 3D, once again, the X coordinate, using the window width. We can just grab the window width in the beginning by using window.innerWidth. You could just use any high value to make sure that something flies out to the right side. In this case, we want to fly it out to the left side. So in that case, I will just use, I think, translate minus. Is the string right? Yeah. And as a result, we should see that it collapses and flies out at the same time. So that is basically the whole animation. We see the big item, it flies out, it closes. The only thing that's missing is a little event emitter. I will just show this to wrap up the whole topic. So you can put into your custom components an event emitter. You've used this maybe already, but you maybe never noticed how it actually works. So by using the event emitter, you can now emit new values, like here. Be careful, we want to play the animation. No, we're gonna do it like this. We immediately gonna emit true if we want to delete something right here. We can catch this within our email setup. It's just like an input, only that it's an output. That could be a real good quote. And since we call the event emitter delete, we're gonna put in a function to, let's say, remove a mail by the ID. And then we're gonna have to imp or add this to our mail page. There's a little problem. There's like always a little problem. And the problem here is that only filtering your emails won't actually update your UI. So right now this would run. Let's say remove ID, and we will also see that our emails, this.emails would decrease all the time since we're filtering out an element. To show you the problem, I'm gonna stop the animation for now. We're gonna see that the output is actually emitted. This slides out, and now we got 19, we got 18, we got 17. They are removed from the array, but the view is simply not updated. And to update your view, you can now use the private change detector. Change detector ref. That's if you need to manually update your view in some cases when your code runs outside of the Angular change detection. Then you just call detect changes. It's really helpful. We've, I guess, used this before as well. And as a result, we will see that now immediately our items are removed. That's horrible. We had such a great animation. Why is everything gone immediately? Well, I can show you why. That's the last cool thing we're gonna do today. The problem is that we need to wait until our animation is finished, but the animation controller API is actually pretty good. And you can just call on finish. And only when the animation has finished, we're gonna call our delete, we're gonna emit these true. And as a result, our component has enough time to finish the glorious animation that we've defined, swiping out, and then yeah, we had that the item is actually removed. We've seen the logs, and then we got everything in here. This feels so good with the compose button and the fading header. I especially like this rounded shadow making the items that you're currently selecting stand out. I think that is really something you can copy, or changing the height of the icon with the haptic. That's really a nice user feedback that goes into the direction of UX already, I guess. But overall, I think that's a pretty sleek and epic Ionic animation for our Gmail client. Alright, it for today. I'm really happy that I could even improve the prepared code for this tutorial during the video. The animation for the FAB button got a lot better, and I'm still super excited and super happy about this slide to delete or archive functionality on the Ion list, since you can really implement this for basically every list that you're building, and I think it's a super epic addition and makes your app just feel awesome. Yes, using this Ion sliding works in, let's say, standard cases where you just need the functionality, but if you're looking for a great UI and UX, this is really what you implement. I hope you enjoyed this second part of Build with Ionic Gmail clone. If you want to see more other videos, let me know in the comments, and definitely leave a like and subscribe to this channel. I think we've reached 40k by now, so we're on our way to 50k and perhaps 100k one day. Thanks for checking out the video. I will catch you next week. Have a great week and happy coding. Simon.